Emmet's Dawn by Joe Lance. Chapter 2. The Smiling Mask. Prologue. The night was restless. A low hum vibrating through the cavern. Ancient syllables crawled against the air like whispers from something beyond. Figures stood cloaked beneath ritual sigils, their faces obscured by bone-crafted masks, grotesque depictions of forgotten deities. At the center, a crude, cracked altar bore the marks of countless forgotten ceremonies. Above it, suspended within a field of darkened energy, a child. "Finally," murmured the figure in the goat skull mask, their voice trembling with reverence. "Tonight, the holy veil fractures." A tear split the fabric of reality, a rupture, unnatural and vibrating with ominous force. A hand, clawed and slick with abyssal shadow, pressed against the breach, struggling to escape into the mortal world. The cultists raised their voices, chanting, offering the child as the key. Then the massacre began. The ritual's crescendo was brutally interrupted. The first cultist dropped without a sound, a silent rupture in their unholy chorus. A figure, impossibly swift, materialized from the shadows, its movement a stark anomaly against the static forms of the chanting figures. Its mask, painted with an unsettling grin, was the last thing many of them ever saw. The smiling face had arrived. Steel sang a gruesome lullaby. Bodies fell like sheaves of wheat under a scythe, each movement of the masked figure 100 precise strikes. The air, moments before alive with ancient syllables, now filled with the wet thud of impact and the gurgle of dying breaths. Demonic sigils, infused with their lifeblood, flickered and died. The cult's desperate leader, seeing his ranks decimated, snarled, "The ritual must be complete. Take this vessel, demon." He lifted the child higher, the infant now floating above the altar, convulsing and shaking violently as the abyssal hand clawed at the widening rift. The child was being pulled, stretched and twisted by unnatural forces, acting as the living key to the demon's passage. The energy around them spiraled, cracking against the ancient altar itself. One movement, a single flash. The ritual leader's body collapsed in pieces, his voice cut short. Still, the abyssal hand clawed further outward, the crack widening, reality buckling. The masked figure sighed, as if tired of such things. "Sorry, demon. Not today." A glowing device whirled through the air, infused with suppressed energy. With a blast, the rupture shuddered. The abyss retracted. The world was sealed once more. The masked man turned to the child, watching as unstable magic pulsed around him. Fragile, erratic, on the verge of collapse, he immediately began to analyze the surging energies. "Another one of their experiments," he murmured, his voice laced with grim understanding. "Poor little child. What did they do to you?" He observed the faint, altered power of a divinant flickering within the infant, twisted by the ritual. "It seems this boy will eventually die, but I won't let it." Despite everything, the massacre, the chaos, the infant looked up at the painted smile and smiled back. The man chuckled, shaking his head. "A rare one, huh?" His amusement faded. "Your divine core. I need to stabilize it." Reacting instantly, the masked warrior carved sigils into the ground, a stabilizing force rising around the child. "Hang in there, little one. I won't let you die." The ancient glyphs bound the unstable magic, securing it. But something had shifted. The potential for greatness, altered, damaged, lost. "I'm sorry," he whispered, watching the child float, his gaze filled with a quiet regret. "Your future power as an elemental divinant could have held great potential, but this is the least I can do." He exhaled, his gaze shifting northward. "I'll take you where it's safe." The pilgrim's child. The northern winds carried the scent of ancient prayers, drifting over the village as pilgrims arrived, wanderers of a lost faith, seeking places once blessed by a God who no longer answered. A cloaked traveler, masked in an eternal grin, strode through the village's resting grounds. His steps were light, yet his presence was heavier than the air itself. In his arms, he carried a child, small and frail, yet brimming with an energy no ordinary infant should possess. He approached an elder, a man wrapped in heavy robes, worn by time but unshaken by it. The masked traveler's voice was calm, unreadable. A wild beast nearly took him. It was a lie, and the elder knew, but he did not question it. Some truths did not need speaking. Instead, the old man reached forward, his hands calloused by years of pilgrimage, and took the child into his embrace. A silent promise that he would be raised, protected, and loved. The masked man exhaled, watching the boy's flickering essence, his strange aura, chaotic but still clinging to life. He reached into his cloak, retrieving a necklace with a crescent moon pendant. This is his. A gift, a symbol, a quiet warning of the unknown. And so he left. He did not look back. The masked man was not meant to linger in ordinary lives. Years later, the strength that should not be. The boy grew within the village, shaped by the warmth of the pilgrims, trained by those who saw his unnatural strength. His body was resilient as a full-grown warrior, though he was still a child. He was given a name, Emmet Langer, a name that meant strong and tall, though it barely captured the mystery woven into his existence. Emmet. The voice came from a woman, Nina, who had chosen to stay behind in the village rather than continue wandering. A widow, but never without purpose. Emmet was her purpose now. Emmet looked up, his face breaking into a wide smile as he spotted her. "Mama!" he cried, running towards her, his steps steady despite his youth, his arms already reaching out for an instinctive hug. He practically launched himself into her embrace. She chuckled, returning his hug tightly. "You're fast." In this quiet village, nestled amidst the northern expanse, the bonds between people were as strong as the biting winds outside its borders. Most of the villagers were once pilgrims themselves, choosing to settle here rather than continue their wandering. This shared history fostered a deep sense of community, and Emmet was growing up, steeped in their traditions, surrounded by faces he knew and trusted. The village was a resting sanctuary, a stop for travelers who honored the now absent elemental god, a deity who had once protected these lands, though its presence had long since faded into legend. Yet they still worshipped, still honored the power that once shielded them from the chaos that lurked beyond the continent's edge. The awakening trials. Among the northern people there were divinants, children blessed with the remnants of divine essence, inheritors of the elementalist lineages that had long defended the north. But they were rare, rarer than belief itself. At 9 years old, every child underwent the awakening ritual, a sacred test to determine whether they carried the elemental essence needed to become divinants. Nina insisted Emmet participate. It was, after all, a foundational tradition of their community. Those chosen were sent to the northern capital, trained to become heroes, guardians of the land's greatest defense, their magic powering the holy veil, a force field that shielded the continent from unknown threats. The luminaries, rulers of the continent, never dared provoke the northern tribes, for they understood the sacred duty carried by the divinants of the north. And yet, Emmet was different. His strength was unnatural, his body resilient. But the elementalist's gift, the one he was supposed to carry, had been profoundly altered by those unseen forces in the cavern years ago. Would he awaken as the others did? Or had fate stolen something vital from him before he ever had the chance to truly begin? The weakest blessing. The village's ceremonial grounds stood silent, the air thick with anticipation. One by one, the children approached the elder, a man whose hands bore the wisdom of countless rituals. He held a glowing crystal rock, its surface smooth and ancient. He chanted soft magical syllables, his voice a low hum, as he gently touched the crystal to the first child, a hopeful young girl. The rock remained dark, inert. The elder offered a soft, sideways nod. "I'm sorry, young one," he murmured, his voice kind despite the disappointment. "But do not despair. Your path is simply different." He patted her shoulder and she bravely walked away. The next child, a boy clutching a small, worn toy dagger, stepped forward. Again, the elder chanted, the crystal lifeless. And another, and another. Each time, the same somber stillness, the crystal refusing to react. The flames of hope in the gathered crowd began to dim. Not one child had manifested elemental magic. Not one had heard the call of the lost god of elements. Not one had proven themselves a true divinant. Finally, it was Emmet's turn. He stepped forward, his small hand instinctively reaching for the elder's. The elder's gaze lingered on him, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, before he placed the crystal rock against Emmet's forehead. He began to chant, the familiar words echoing in the quiet air. This time, the crystal didn't remain dark. It glowed, a faint, flickering light, a barely perceptible pulse that was there, but fragile, altered. The elder's eyes narrowed. This was divinity, yes, but twisted. He knew immediately. It was the mark of a tool type. The words, "He is unfortunate," hung unspoken in the elder's mind, a quiet acknowledgement of the boy's altered fate. Yet his gaze softened as he met Emmet's innocent eyes. He took a deep breath, turning to address all the children, his voice ringing with renewed purpose. "Listen, young ones," he declared, his voice strong and clear. "Being a divinant is indeed a blessing from the elemental god, but it is not the only blessing. Even if one is not chosen in the way of a warrior or elementalist, we still can do many great things. This is not a limitation, but a challenge, a different path to greatness." Still, a whisper passed through the gathered pilgrims. Not gifted, but still chosen. Is that even worth anything? As the ritual concluded, the elders turned their attention to the only other boy who had shown any sign of awakening. His gift was small, unimpressive, yet enough to receive the mark of a divinant. He was celebrated, though his blessing barely carried weight. Still, they congratulated all the children and Emmet for even the weakest divinants held a place within the North's sacred legacy. Yet somewhere, beyond the ceremony, beyond the words that had already shaped his path, the boy stood in silence, staring at his own hands. He had awakened, but not the way he should have. The journey to the capital. The caravan moved steadily across the frozen terrain, a procession of merchants, pilgrims, and travelers, each with their own purpose for venturing toward the capital. The horses pulled their weight through the uneven path, their breath visible in the cold northern air. Emmet sat close to his adopted mother, Nina, his small hands gripping the edge of the wagon. His gaze stretched beyond the road, toward the rolling expanse of tundra that had always been his home. "Mama, do we have to go?" His voice carried uncertainty, the question not born of fear, but of reluctance, an unwillingness to leave behind the only world he knew. Nina sighed, adjusting the thick fur around his shoulders. "Yes, Emmet. We need to understand your divinity. Only the capital has the right tools to assess you properly and guide you." Emmet frowned, his grip tightening. "But I don't want to. I want to stay here." Nina's expression softened, her voice gentle yet firm. "Oh, young Emmet, it is the sacred duty of every Northerner to serve the North if they are identified as a divinant. It is not forced, but it is tradition." She let the words settle before continuing. "Think of the benefits you will reap once the sovereigns take notice of you." The sovereigns, the rulers of all divinants, the most powerful elementalists in the North. They decided the fate of the awakened. Emmet blinked. "But I'm just a tool type. Would they even care?" Nina smiled, brushing a strand of his hair back. "A gift is still a gift, my boy. If you find the right way to use it, perhaps your future will be greater than you think." There was a pause. Then, like the innocent child he was, Emmet grinned. "Really, Mama? Then I'll go, because if my future is good, then yours will be too. I want to make our future good." Nina chuckled, pulling him close, pressing a kiss against his forehead. "You are a very good boy." The caravan pushed forward, the capital waiting ahead, and beyond it, the unknown future awaiting Emmet Langer. The ambush at the border. The caravan rolled steadily toward the northern border, the cold wind biting at exposed skin. Merchants muttered among themselves, counting goods for trade. Pilgrims murmured prayers, seeking guidance from a god long gone. The travelers moved as one, a fragile peace, untouched by conflict. Then, their peace shattered. Figures emerged from the rocky pass ahead. Armed men, dressed in patchwork armor, their presence heavy with intent. Not bandits, worse. Criminals, outcasts, survivors from beyond the border. Their leader, grinning, stepped forward, his eyes flickering across the caravan's gathered souls. "Pilgrims? Merchants? We want your stuff." His voice was casual, almost amused. He gestured to his men. "You know, it's hard outside the border. We're not from here. Survival comes first." A hush fell upon the caravan. Then, one of the caravan leaders, a seasoned fighter, stepped forward. "You are not Northerners," he stated, voice firm, unmoved. "You know that doing crime in our land constitutes death." There was no threat, only certainty. The outlaws laughed. One of them leaned close to a young pilgrim girl, his tongue flicking out in mockery, hungry and cruel. Fear the sovereigns? He sneered. Of course we do. But we're desperate. We need food and women. The tension snapped. Steel sang. Fighters readied themselves. The battle erupted. The carnage begins. The pilgrims were weak, their weapons inadequate, their bodies untrained for war. The outlaws struck hard, fast, unforgiving. Blades cleaved through flesh, screams swallowed by the bitter wind. The snow ran red, staining the purity of the land with brutality. One by one, the caravan members fell. None of the outlaws died. They did not fight. They slaughtered. Among the chaos, Nina turned to Emmet, her hands gripping his shoulders. "Hide," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. "Now." But Emmet did not move. His eyes took in the scene, not in terror, but in calculation. The screams, the blood, the unyielding cruelty of these men. Then he saw her, Nina, his mother, a hand raised, a slap incoming, a simple act of violence. But it meant everything. Something flared inside him, something primal, unrelenting. His fingers grasped the pebbles at his feet. He whipped them forward, a sharp snap in the air. The stone struck the man's face with surprising force. His head jerked back. His eyes narrowed in fury. "Don't you dare touch my mama." Silence. Then the world moved. A masked savior and a new purpose. The battlefield was chaos, blood pooling over the frozen ground, the air thick with the scent of iron. The criminals had expected an easy slaughter, their desperation outweighing their fear of the sovereigns. The caravan was falling apart, the weak struggling against the merciless. But Emmet stood his ground. His small hands had grasped a simple pebble, but when he hurled it, it struck with unnatural force, piercing through armor, knocking his target down. The man crashed into the snow, not dead, but stunned. There was power in Emmet's hands, not controlled, not understood, but real. He moved, punched his way through bodies, weaving through the chaos with raw instinct until he reached Nina, who trembled behind him. He stood firm, his stance planted in the dirt. "Don't worry, Mama. I will protect you." The criminals paused, their leader sneering. "A young elementalist," he muttered. "We should be careful. Divinants are strong, even the young ones. They believed him fragile despite his magic, powerful in essence, weak in body. They were wrong." Then, silence. Behind the criminal leader, his men began to fall, one by one. No screams, no warning. He turned, confusion flickering across his face. "I said, help me! What are you?" The words died in his throat. Bodies lay scattered, cut apart, blown apart, severed from existence. And at the center, a figure standing without effort, wearing a grinning mask. The masked man grasped the leader's face, lifted him effortlessly, and hurled him into the sky. A pulse of black energy gathered in the warrior's palm, a sphere brimming with destruction. Yet he did not even look as he launched it. The sky erupted. The criminal leader's body vanished into nothing, a death too swift to register. The masked man knelt before Emmet, his posture open, as if ensuring the boy felt safe. "I'm sorry I was late." But Emmet was calm. There was no fear in his eyes, only calculation. The masked man smiled beneath his painted grin. "You're brave, little one." Thank you for protecting them. Emmet swallowed. Thank you for saving us. Nina ran to him, embracing him tightly. The remaining travelers thanked their savior, some whispering prayers of gratitude, others simply stunned by his presence. The masked man promised to escort them further, warning them that more criminals lurked near the border. The world beyond is falling apart, he murmured. Desperation drives men to madness. As they traveled, Emmet grew curious. Holding Nina's hand, he turned toward the masked man. Can I ask you something? The warrior's voice was friendly. Go ahead, ask. Emmet tilted his head. Why do you wear a mask with a smiling face? Are you hiding an ugly face? The masked man chuckled, not offended, recognizing the boy's sincerity. Yes, I have an unsightly face, but that's not the reason. He adjusted his stance, his voice lighter. I wear this mask because I am a seeker from the Finders Guild. The explanation followed. Mercenaries, protectors, those who searched for the lost and the forgotten. But the real answer came next. I wear this mask because I want to see people smile. That is why I do what I do. In dark times, seeing people smile means hope still exists. The words struck something deep in Emmet. Seeing his mother smile, he wanted that. Seeing the people he cared about safe, he wanted that too. His gaze steadied, his heart quiet. He turned to the masked man, voice serious, unwavering. I want to be a seeker too, and join the Founder's Store. The masked man laughed, ruffling his hair. Not Founder's Store, Finder's Guild. And with those words, a path was chosen. The boy who had once doubted his fate now had a purpose. He would become a seeker. He would bring hope. And one day, people would smile because of him. End of chapter 2.